Okay, it's video 3 in our multi-part, forever long demonstration on grass rendering distance. Parts 1 and 2, I just do a brief recap there. So basically, in part 1, we did intro to the landscapes. Highlight the engine info, landscape creation, component overviews, landscape components to be clear, landscape component overview, landscape sizes, brief on that, sculpting, and then we reviewed some of the tools for sculpting, the component review and examples, performance considerations, etc. Culling, occlusion. We really didn't hit much on culling. It was more along the lines of occlusion, how to use your landscape to occlude other components so you can have really detailed sections and that don't have a heavy impact of draw calls from the other components being pulled into memory. Let's see, in the video 2, previous video, covered materials and textures and their differences, material functions, the landscape material blending, and we did a little example painting a landscape, and how the layer blends work and how this landscape blueprint kind of comes together. So from here we're jumping into the Procedural Foliage Tool, which is this bad boy up here. So we don't need this anymore, we don't need that anymore. If I need that, I'll pull it back up. So we're kind of just gonna jump right out of this little world. You can say bye to this guy. I'm not saving it. I mean, the only purpose for it was for this demo. So goodbye fake house, goodbye landscape, goodbye level. We're gonna actually go straight into my little PUBG grass levels. I have one with procedural. No. Alright, so here we go with this. Procedural foliage. Well, let me just overview what I've got here. There's a few more things I've added into. So I built a landscape. I've added trees in here. I think it's roughly 41 trees in the whole view, the whole landscape here. And as far as the atmosphere is going on, I added a post-processing volume, which is that little bitty square thing that you see in the right there. It's lighting tweaks and whatnot, so I can get some cool little effects. See a little. Check that out. Boom, pretty sun. I went through and obviously took my materials and painted them on. Just ran through here. I spent like maybe a whole hour on the landscape itself, just to give it some definition, little usage here and there. And I plastered in all these, put some grass in here. You can see the grass with Foliage Tool. So this is our little world we're going to play with. I put a player start here because this is one of my test zones because of the view. Grass coverage, number of trees, and whatnot. We can get a pretty decent frame rate spec here. It's one trouble area, so I decided to plop a point there. But I created this world, this level, and I duplicated it over, got rid of the grass, applied the grass with the material base and whatnot. So tree placement, tree count, the landscape itself, and everything else is identical in the material based one, other than the grass, and I added a few extra little things to that one to really highlight the differences here. The trees themselves, I know we're supposed to really get into, part of this video is going to be the meshes, so I think I'm going to jump into the mesh part first before we actually jump into application. Let me just, we're going to show the tool real quick here. Here's the paint tool, and it gives you a bubble, a little radius. You can adjust the size of it, and then it has a paint density. But the paint density here, I mean, it maxes out to 1, but basically what it's for, it's just a multiplier. And let me turn that there. So like when I click on this tree, let's see, the grass is checked on it. Make sure nothing's checked in there. I click on this tree, it's highlighted, so you get specs for that tree, but that's kind of hidden here. If you don't know how to get to that, there you go, boom. But you have to be clicked on something. So when you're not clicked on anything, there's nothing there. Click on something, then you can get the actual specs. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this down, lower it down. Just changing the frame rate because we're changing the screen resolution. You can get those little jaggedy dips. I can pull this up a little bit, so right there. It's the mesh that we're using. It's right there. You can get some. Let me pull this a little bit over this way so we can see all this stuff. Component class, it's foliage instance static mesh component. Just it's bound to this tool. We get our painting density, and when you get into density, it's foliage instances will be replaced at this density specified in instances per 1,000 by 1,000 unit area. 1,000, as I said before, units in Unreal are based off of centimeters. So 1 unit is 1 centimeter. So you got 1,000 centimeters by 1,000 centimeters, which is 10 meters. So 10 meters square. So a block 10 meters square is what we're dealing with. I can give you an idea of what that is real quick with our mesh cube. Let me pull him up here and just go. Where basically the cube itself is 1 meter. So 10 by 10. And we'll just leave that at 1. That's a 10 by 10. And to give you some idea of what that looks like in our little world here, I'm going to just bring it over here and push it down the ground just enough so that you can get a reference. That's a 10 by 10. Tree, 10 by 10. And you know what, I'm just going to pull this little guy up and over, and we'll just keep him for a reference, but I don't really want him in the scene, so I'll pull him up there out of the viewpoint. And we're going to go 10 by 10 is going to, so we can have him in here later on. So for our little usage, but anyway, that's 10 by 10, so get an idea of what it means by when I say 10 by 10 area. Density, 1,000 to that 1 kUU. So our density here, foliage density, is basically saying, hey, I only want to put 2 per 1,000. But this is a multiplier up here. So 1 times 2 is 2. So forth. So let's change this back. I'm just going to put it like a, what's the default? I think the default's 100. The radius here just stipulates, you know, how far apart those instances are when they get put in. The minimum distance between foliage instances. So if I was to go and plop trees down over here, if I was going, that radius is not big enough, so I'll pop this up. If I was to plop trees, it would max that out as, you know, it would calculate one placement, and then the max distance away is 1024, so it would find some other spot in there that's 1024 units, 1024 centimeters away from the other placement, and plop it. Let me just go up here. There you go. Because of the radius of that brush and the density that I have. So there you go. You can kind of see that it's plotted out pretty good. All this distance here is equal to this distance. You get a little offset here, but I mean in general you can see that it's working like it should. Let me just pop those out. Just like with the paint tool, you hold shift to remove them. Now while I'm doing this, I might as well, we're doing with the tree, so I got 41 trees in there. So I'm going to crank this up. I'm going to crank out my radius here, and let me just make it real big. So that's a pretty big distance. Boom, I just popped in a forest. So we went from 41 trees in this whole world to 185, so there's quite a few trees over here. And while I'm here, I'm going to just give you, I mean, to get a real idea of how this is going to affect you, I'd have to do a full bake on this, but I'm not going to. Let me see, play, current camera position, and let me just get down here. I'm gonna fall in right there. Boom. So actually, let me do this first too. I want that FPS. So right now it's showing me at, you know, 100 and change FPS up in the scene. But that FPS is based off of this viewport's screen size. So this is not the screen size that you're going to be playing with in game, so I'm going to full screen it. So to give you an idea, let me just sprint on out here. With the landscape alone, we're looking at 120. We're topping the 120, maxing out 120. What the limits are right now, what they're set in for the project is 120. So it's wobbling 120, 119. I got a 60 hertz monitor, so I mean I'm not even seeing those extra 60 in reality. But we get in here and we got these trees. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, look at that. It's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. We got woods, and yeah, it did dip us, but considering the trees and how many polys are in these stinking trees, they're huge. And I'm going to show that to you in a second. These aren't production trees. And what I mean by production is this is not the type of tree, as far as level of detail that's in it, that you would put in a first-person shooter like PUBG. I mean, there's way too many freaking polys in this tree. Way too many. I mean, you can use the textures and whatnot for the materials and everything, so you can get a decent looking tree, but poly wise you would not. It's just way too much. I'm gonna get out of that, and I'm gonna show you exactly what I mean by the poly count. So we're gonna click on our little mesh here, and the way you add these in, just for future now, you would just go into your assets, find your static meshes, whatever they may be, and you just kind of drag and drop them into this field. So like if that's plains flower, we already have that one. That's a different grass. And here's a fern. So I grab this and I drag it up. Boom, it's in there. Now I can actually add it into my world. Let me drop this down, uncheck the trees. I really don't want that kind of coverage. Boom, and I have that crazy density, so I got these crazy, that's ugly. So I'm just going to take this out. But that's how easy it is to add an element up here. It's got to be a static mesh. Uncheck this guy, and I'm actually going to remove him, so I'm not adding nothing. So we got our 185 trees. These are going to go bye-bye in a minute because I don't want them affecting anything in our overall testing. Bring this density back down to like a really limit. Let me just type it 10. And just leave that there. Tree. Click on that. That's going to just load my mesh in. Here's my mesh that I'm using for this nice little tree. Supplied by Epic Games directly. This comes from their open world demo. Kite demo is basically what it is in the project. But I mean, this is a cinematic tree. You could use this something like this in possibly a cinematic, one of those cutscenes and whatnot. It's really good, intro to the game or whatnot. But I mean, this is not going to go into a multiplayer world. Triangles, 49,900 or 495. So basically 49,500 triangles. 58,000 vertices. It's got 8 UV channels, so that's 8 levels of detail that's in there. It's got the minimal is the lot 0 kind of deal, so that's a heavy tree, and you would not be in your right mind to put this in a production level for multiplayer. I mean, it's got some cool effects to it. I don't know if it's going to show it in here. Yeah, there it goes. See, it clipped the level of detail. And see, right now it's in a billboard. That's a billboard. See, it's just a 2D plane. That's it. It's basically just take a picture of a tree and, apply transparency to everything other than the tree, and that's a billboard. So at far distances, like what we're at right now, it shows us that. So at least we can see it. See that there's something supposed to be there, and as we get closer, the detail starts filling in. Closer and more detail, and closer and closer and closer until we're at that range where full detail's at. But anyway, that's the static mesh that we're using in this setup. So there's a lot of polys here, and it didn't have that crazy ass dip. I mean, that's considering that we have we got 144 just in this area here. Just in this area, 144 of those 50,000 poly trees. I mean, you can see them. The wireframe says it all. That's a lot of triangles. Tris, as we would say. A lot. So this is nowhere near a production level setup, but I mean, I'm just using it. They're pretty, and I want to prove a point that even with all those stinking trees, so see there goes the billboards, that right there is performance adjustment that's been made to these trees. I don't need to be drawing all those polys or trying to render all those polys from this distance. That's a performance. That's a professional performance tweak. Thank you, Epic. So I'm going to go back in here. Where's my brush size? I'm going to yank this up, and I'm going to wipe these trees out. They're not part of my little demonstration. And I can yank this back down to a reasonable size so it's just not irritating me. Anyway, that's the polys for the tree. Here's the mesh for the grass. Very low. 24 and 48. 3 channels. Not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. So, very simple. It's just a bunch of sheet planes with the texture applied to it. So it's pretty daggone low. Let's get back up in here. I don't need this loaded anymore. But as you can see, as I load these things in with the levels, my memory usage over here is just going off the charts. And just for record here, because we are getting into testing on all this craziness, my setup is an AMD 8350, the FX series, AM3 Plus. It's a 8-core, 4 gigahertz stock, and I have 16 gigs of memory, and I have an AMD RX 580 8 gig Eros graphics. So I have let me just save that. I do have some, it's mid-high, mid-range high. I mean, it's an old system, but I mean, it does what it needs to do. And it's good enough to get in here and do some accurate testing, because I can run full specs PUBG and do some get it really decent. I hit my 60. Some things I might dip down, but on average I have my 60. My render distance is slammed out to ultra. But anyway, so we have, all these little things over here. I might not have said anything about the filters. Let me get into this real quick. So single instance mode here, that just means that I'm only placing one at location. It's just single. It's not turning all of these into a single instance. It's just saying, hey, you're only placing one instance of the mesh at location, versus that whole, your whole density grouping. It would just be one. So if I went to the grass and said, hey, I'm going to apply grass, the brush size doesn't even matter anymore. That doesn't even matter anymore. It just gives me this little bitty thing. Boom. Oh, what do I got? I got a tree in there too. Let me, yikes. Let me, oh crap. I gotta undo that and, come on. Oh, tree's not selected. Boom. Dirt. Alright. Uncheck the tree. I only have grass selected, so let me get back down in here so you can see it. Boom. It just does one patch. One little patch mesh. So, I mean, yeah, I'll explain why that's important later. I mean, it's basically for detailing things out. If I wanted a patch right there, I can just add a patch right there. But anyway, let's just start getting into the real meat and potatoes here. Video's cranking out at 20 minutes right now. So, testing this out a little bit. So, here we go. There's 148,000 of these grass meshes placed in this little world area. And let me pull this up. And that world area consists of basically this that I'm applying it to. It's up in here, around in the little valley. And you'll notice I did do this into a valley to cut, add some occlusion, so I'm not seeing a lot of these outside components when we're down here and testing. I just wanted to isolate it to this area, more proving points, procedural versus material based application. So I mean, it's not crazy whole world filling kind of deal, but I mean, you can start seeing it, the density of this. It's still patchy. I mean, it's really patchy. And there's 148,000 instances of that. You know, proof in the pudding here, people. 148,000 instance count. So that's a whole lot. 148,000 of those little grass babies. And see, there's large sections here that I don't have any meshing. And as far as the culling goes, pull this back up. The culling on the grass, right now, I got it set, cull distance here. You got it's popped up on the screen right for you to read it. The distance where instances will begin to fade out if using a persistence fade amount material net, blah blah blah, 0 disables. When the entire cluster is beyond this distance, the cluster is completely culled and not rendered at all. And it's based off, you know, clustering. You know, when I plot these things down with this little bubble, it makes these little clusters. And it's range dependent too, but I mean, you can see it fading off. But right now, remember our units, it's world units are 1 centimeter a pop, so 125 or 12,500 units is 125 meters, and that's 150 meters. So we're not in PUBG right now using their 75 meter cull. It's going to go prove a point here. Even in this min frame, I mean, this resolution for this viewport, you can already see that the frame rate's dropping drastically here. We're at 50s and whatnot. Wait till I go full screen. And do remember my specs. I have an 8 gig graphics card. It's an Aros RX 580. It's 16 gigs of memory and an 8 core processor pushing 4 gigahertz per core. So I'm gonna go ahead and play it from a, oh yeah, I'm doing that stupid camera thing again. I don't want to do camera. Default player starts, play, and I'm gonna go to full screen so we can get the impact of that. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. 32. There's 31, 34, you know, 31 seems right now. I will just say 31 is our lowest at this point. I told you this was going to be an impact point. As I move closer to the edge, I'm getting more of this lower grass into my view versus when I'm back here. See, 39, I start creeping, 32, 31. So I'm just going to say 31. Even though it dipped a little bit, I'm just going to say 31 is our lowest. So I'm going to start running around in here. I got regular walk speed. I added a sprint to the system, to the controls and whatnot. I actually coded sprint into it because it doesn't come with sprint built in. It's got an ugly crouch in it because crouch effects, I haven't done timelining on it, but it's an instant crouch. Boom. Full height, half height, full height, half height. I had crouch speed implemented in here too, so we can get some tweaks and everything. But just this regular run speed, or walk speed, I should say, is pretty decent. You know, you can see the drop off happening. Cull distance. Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, I haven't seen anything dip yet to past 31 beyond that one point. So I mean, we're looking at some we got 40s, but do you remember splotchy? I could completely fill all of this up with grass, so it's non-splotched, but we're talking 250,000 instances or more to get that. And I'm not even going to count over there, because typically you would have grass up in there rendering too at this point. Anywhere that's pretty much green you could have grass, but it's on the slopes here I did, you know, put dirt, so I didn't want grass. It's not realistic, but again, splotchy, I got, you know, there we go. I'm gonna look straight at the ground. I don't have too many of these instances in screen. 120 again. I start panning it, it's just gonna start dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping. The more that I can get in, I'm gonna add some trees into there. And remember, the trees are high poly, but they don't have that massive impact of this grass. All this major dip here is this grass, procedural grass. It just wipes it out. And be honest with you, the total count here with this 148,000 instances, that exceeds the world limit. So when I go build lighting for this, when I built lighting for this earlier, it took over an hour to do the lighting build, and I got massive error coming back saying there's just too many grass meshes. There's way too many for the component space that I'm working with, but way too many overall, because you also got to consider everything else that has to go in this little world if it was going to be a level in a game. It's just not going to be trees and grass in a landscape. You got your buildings, you got rocks and rubble that you want to add, dead trees, tree trunks, other little plants like flowers or whatever kind of detailing you want to do with that, ferns, bushes, and whatnot. And this is just grass and trees in a landscape. And oh wait, there we go. I just got that spot. 28. 28 is our new low here. 28. Ouch. I have to remember this spot. Alright, this tree. 28. 27. What is wrong with that spot? I got plenty of patches there. Wow. 27. I didn't see this earlier. 27. That's ouch. Okay, 27 is our low number here. So we'll remember that number. Get out of that screen. So we can honestly say that, procedural grass, massive impact. Well, I can say it. Oh, let me see that. Where was that? Okay, right here. Let me just play this again, and I'll show it to you. Yada yada yada. Run, 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 dude. Let me pop back into full screen. Run, run, run. Up here on this tree earlier, when I was building this out, I set up a specific distance from this tree, right here, to that little spot up here. This little patch, I made a point to measure this out. 75 meters to the center of this patch. 75 meters up to that tree in this point. So that's the PUBG distance for culling grass, as far as everybody's aware. It's what it looks like in game based off of rough measurement estimates and everything, and using the map grid, which breaks down the smallest unit in the map grid in PUBG is 100 units. So this is about right. 75 is what we're dealing with here. So with that, remember on our foliage for our grass, we had this crazy distance here. I'm going to bring this back down to 7,500, which is 75 meters, and I'm going to start the cull distance at 50 meters. So at 50, it's going to start fading it out, and at 75, it's a complete drop off. So we can already see that take effect here. Meant to do that earlier. So our 27 with 150 meter. So I'm gonna make note of that right now. It was a 27 was our low when we did a 150 meter drop off. I'm gonna go full screen now. So yeah, definitely big, because remember we were getting 30 here. That's 17 FPS increase right there, just for changing the cull distance. So grass, and there's already a cull distance on the tree. It's a lot further out because you want to see big objects a lot more, and for further distances than you do these little small objects. But hit my tree, you can roughly see it because there's no grass on that particular spot over there. It wraps around it. It's basically there. It's basically there. I mean, I could tweak it so it's dead on at 75. So I would, take my cull distance, my max cull of the complete fall off, and say maybe 80, and then do a an adjustment on my start to fade distance, so that's a little bit tighter. You want a nice clean transition. You just don't want that drop off, boom, no grass, and then pop grass, pop grass. You kind of want to fade it in and out. So that's what the two numbers there are for. So center of that spot seems to be right around there, so I could just add like a meter to that, 76, 77 meters, and to get what it's a good ballpark, but I'm not going to bother with that. So we need to go over here to our little crazy tree. Shoot some Nerf balls. It's another thing in the first person blueprint. The engine comes with these third person basic setups, like starter kit kind of setups, just to get you rolling, and so you're not having to code everything from 100% scratch. You have something to start with, and I'm just using the first person one for there. But so, yeah. See, we were 27 in this scene. I think it was this tree. I'm pretty sure it was this tree. Yeah, this tree. There was a 27, something like that in there. Got up to here, 46, 47. So we had 20 FPS gain from that just in this scene area, and there's a lot of stuff here. Maybe it was over on this one. I'm just gonna run around and check it. But overall, roughly 15 to 20. Maybe it was this scene. 46, still a 20. Let me check this tree too. Boom. 47, 46, 48. Yeah. 20 FPS, easy right there from changing that cull distance. Stupid grass. I mean, the reason why it has such an impact is because how many of them you're throwing in there. You know, you take 40 trees times 50,000 polys, I think it was. You know, you get a lot of freaking polys. 2 million. Now you take these instances. Each instance of this, I think it was 24 polys, I believe. Something like that. Now multiply that by how many are in view right now. Ballpark 40,000 maybe. 30,000. 30,000 times 48. You know, there's a whole lot of polys in view right here because of those stupid little grass blades. And they have to fill up in order for them to look good. I mean, this looks okay. But, you know, it's not good in my view. But then again, I'm a bit snobbish about this stuff. Been doing this for a long time, and I'm quite picky. Procedural just sucks for this type of thing. It's great for trees, great for rocks, great for garbage stuff that you want to, little props that you want to drop around your world. But when it comes to grass, no. You have to be insane to do that in a first-person shooter, especially if it's multiplayer. Single player, you might be able to get away with it in some instances, but not really. You definitely don't want to use this in a multiplayer game. Nope. Frame rate. As soon as I add it, if I add another player, and an active another player with its own controller across the internet, and in this scene, I would just tank. It would just tank the frame rate. But anyway, I think we're good with that. We got our low in here. Let me actually see that again. We need to make sure that we get our low count. Play. Make sure we get I got a 40 low, a 39 low. Where was that? 39, 38, 37 low. Where is that spot at? Here's my base spot. It's 46, 45, 39. There was a 37 in here somewhere. 39, 40. So I'm just gonna call trucking low 40, mid 40s. I mean, there's gonna be some spikes of good stuff here, 50s, but through the chunk here, we're mid 40s. And just ballpark it there, mid 40s. And I look up, I get about 120. Hey, my frame rate's back. We get some when we get in these barren areas, which, you know, not so many barren areas in the other one. Yeah, I'm just gonna call them mid 40s, mid to low 40s. That's our ballpark. Weak spikes, upward spikes. So yeah, we're good there. Get out of that. So procedural, kind of a no-go. So I'm gonna round up this particular video on procedure foliage. We've got our testing. At 150 meters, we were doing, I think, our with our cull drop off, we were doing 27 as a low. Once we pulled it back into the 75, our low point was what was our low point? I think it was a 39 low with a I'll just say a 44 average. We had some spikes up. We had some upward spikes here and there. But okay, so we got our base numbers for that. So that's going to conclude this video. I'm going to load up the next part for part 4, where we're going over the material blended grass, which we're going to cover the blueprint review of that, and I'm going to give you an explanation on that, a little bit more detailed explanation of that. We're going to look at the landscape grass type. It's a little walkthrough on that, and how when we draw when we take our landscape layer with that the actual mesh layer from our landscape material, and we paint with that, it's going to actually poof, it's going to grow this grass, or it's going to render this actual grass that you see on scene wherever I paint. And we're going to go a little bit with its culling. We're going to adjust its culling back and forth to see what kind of results we get with that, and then do the overall testing for the results, and then we can hit our little procedural versus material roundup. So I'm going to go ahead and end this one, and we'll start the next one